So Aquarius, your week beginning the 10th of November forecast suggests that your idealism, the part of you that's quite invested in your values, could compete with another part of your situation which needs to exist in the real world. And for most of us that is through our work, but it can also be paying the mortgage too, paying the rent. And the reason for this is that Mercury, the planet of thinking, has gone into a retrograde in a very positive part of your chart, the sign of Sagittarius, but that may mean that some of your future hopes need to, in some ways, take into account some of those harsh realities that are part and parcel of modern life. It's also possible through to the 19th of November that when it comes to your social situation, things could be a little bit fluid. But if you do have a conversation at the heart of this week and you feel very invested in your beliefs, and it could be with a friend, it may be online, it could be around your network, you can punch across how you think with a lot of conviction. But because of Mercury's retrograde and the quarter moon, which occurs at the heart of the week too, don't necessarily assume that other people will receive what you're sending them in exactly the way you mean. So some care around communication, understandably with Mercury retrograde, is going to be important. But Mercury retrogrades also give us an opportunity. And I feel this doesn't get out there. It's always seen as just being about glitches. But you may, if you don't feel you're on the right long-term track, decide to change your approach, and it could be around your work, and this can manifest itself by the end of November when Mercury ends its retrograde on the 29th. So I think your hopes for the future seem to be a lot to do with how you work or how you link to the wider world. And part of the reason for that is the Sun, but also the charming energies of Venus are in a very visible part of your situation, and it may be that people are becoming much more conscious of your talents and what you have to offer. But that's where you may have to just lean into a little bit about what their expectations are. So in other words, it's probably going to be tricky to get everything on your own terms. That said, if you are going on a date, meeting someone this week, particularly with the moon going into your 7th house later on Monday, it does go face to face initially with Pluto and also forges a T-square with Venus. It may be that you're attracted to someone and it feels quite compulsive with Pluto and Venus in the square, but the moon in Leo asks you not to be too prideful. If that person sees things slightly different to you, try to keep the lines of communication open. And then, as the week goes on, with Jupiter having gone retrograde on Tuesday, as much as through to the 11th of March, that could see you thinking differently about your daily organisation and routines and the aforementioned work, but perhaps the actual processes within your work. You need to feel a level of inspiration with Jupiter, we all do. But despite that retrograde, I feel you can. And by the end of this week, if you're just prepared to flex, not be too rigid, you're a fixed sign, the Sun and Venus are fixed, the quarter moon is fixed, and Mars and Mercury forge a very pugnacious conjunction, and Mercury's in the retrograde. But by the end of this week, if you've been patiently working towards a goal or an ambition, and it is to do with steady applied attention, very much to the details, being very invested in what you've been doing for some while, you can start to see the rewards come through, despite the Mercury retrograde, despite the Jupiter retrograde. And that's because Jupiter, the Sun, and Saturn, your traditional ruler, forge a gorgeous alliance as this week draws to a close. So that's why it's important, if you do initially encounter some resistance to your big picture, your ideas, your brilliance even, try to stay with it, because your modern ruler, remember, has inversed back into a much more emotional part of your situation. And because it is in a quincunx with Mars right at the start of this week, If there is a friend, for example, who doesn't quite get where you're coming from, your frustration could easily come through. But try to approach things in a patient way this week, because if you're very clear about where you're heading, particularly around a key goal, it's within sight, it's within touching distance. So even though you could have a debate, a conversation with someone who sees things very differently to you and you feel they're very wrong, I wouldn't get too caught up in that if it deflects you from what's really important, the major prize that you've been working towards. Now, if that major prize isn't calling at you at the moment, I think this week is encouraging you, and over the next few weeks too, to reset in the new direction which works for you as you have evolved to now. If you've yet to order your year 2026 personal horoscope, totally based on your unique birth data and 30% off, please see the link below for more.